Thank you and welcome all. So my name is Sunil Agrawal. I am the Executive Director for TiE New Jersey. So we have, I think, an exciting crowd today. When we looked at last, it was over 100, probably touching 120 attendees who registered for today's event, which is great. So I'm really looking forward to a great session led by Anjan. Before we do all of that, there are a couple of housekeeping items. One is if you could keep your video on, okay, throughout. I think that will be very well. That'll be great for an interactive session. I think that is something which Anjan is highly recommending. The other thing is I am going to share something where we have very good upcoming for events. If you guys all can see my screen, there is. So we have an exciting June 15th TiE University Startup Competition. We have 11 startups from Princeton, from NJIT, from NJCU, and Rutgers who are going to be participating in this live virtual pitch competition, which will be leading them all the way to the TiE global event, which is going to be happening in September. For that, we have sponsorship opportunities, and I would encourage any of you who would be interested to sponsor some of those awards, whether it's the platinum sponsor, the first, second, third, and there are also a couple of additional awards to sponsor. If you're interested, I hope that some of you or many of you have received this email, the invite for this, and anyone who is interested in sponsoring some of those awards, whether it's a platinum, gold, silver, or bronze, please reach out to me or Neetu, and we'll be more than happy to take it further. Okay. Having said that, without any further ado, we do have our president of TiE New Jersey, Raman Kapoor, also on the call. He's on the video, as we can see. Before we have Anjan kick it off, Raman, why don't you say a few words, Raman?
Okay, very good. Thank you, Sunil. Yeah. And, you know, you're all familiar with Jugalbandi, where two accomplished tabla players play against each other, or two instrumentalists. And we have that pleasure this evening. Anjan, you already know, who is the co-founder of Microsoft, and of Birlasoft, CEO of Birlasoft, co-founder of MINDTREE. And you've met him before in many events. And we have the pleasure of Krish Ramakrishnan, another accomplished entrepreneur, here with us to share his insights into how entrepreneurs meet some of the challenges and the tough decisions that they face. So with that, Anjan, take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Raman. And Krish, welcome to the TiE New Jersey Special Interest Group evening. And we, all of us have read your background and your, but so I want to dive deep into it. So I'm going to go straight in because we have very little time and we have lots of questions. So Krish, in the middle of COVID-19, 2 months back in April, I'm sure everybody's asking you this question today. You sold, BlueJeans for about $500 million to Verizon. So we are all here, looking at you, with privilege as a very, very successful entrepreneur. So my first question to you, going deep in, is, what, in your view, were the break points in your career that got you to this point? So there'll be 3-4 things that happened in your life that you suddenly look back and said, yeah, these things. What was that? And how can we learn through this interaction? That's why I've requested people to have their video on. We want to have it interactive. We want to learn from those stories and hopefully, create some stories. So Krish, question to you, what would be the break points in your career that have brought you to here, which is an extremely, all of us look at it as a phenomenal, success. So Krish, over to you.
Thank you, Anjan. Hey, it's great to be here at the TiE New Jersey Forum. Thanks for the invite. Looks like a great group of people. I actually want to make this a a coffee table chat, so interactive and nothing formal, so everybody can be relaxed in their background. I wish we were using BlueJeans, but I'm not arguing that point today. But that said, I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. So there are a couple of moments looking back, it's always say, wow, that made sense and that made sense. But what I would say overall, the set of things that made it happen was, for me, it's always going with the flow. If something happens, just embrace that and go forward. So, I mean, if many of you have I've shared my video, I've never thought I would be a computer science person or anything to do with software. I just, my previous job was working in a power plant in India, in the state of Andhra. I was actually doing construction work with hard hat. That, if you see the picture of me after graduating, that's how I was doing hard hat thing. When I came to the US, I felt that I had to do something. So I actually ended up in a computer science class by a quite accident. I'll keep that for another day. But embracing that, hey, that was in computer science, even though it was an accident, I did that. And it is one of those things where I would say the break, so that would be one. So that got me into the IT field quite early back in the 80s. I went to Monmouth University, so it, many of you are familiar with that. And then in another big point came when in 1990s, when I was working on software and in a company, and the company was, and this internet thing was coming along. Many of the younger person would say, hey, you know, I always think that internet has always been around, but it's only been around for the last 18 years or so, right? It's not that old compared to other technologies. And a couple of friends and I said, hey, how do we leverage the internet? How do we do this? And going with that format, we embraced the internet and wanted to do something with that. But we didn't have any money or anything, so that didn't stop us. We just said, okay, if we don't have money, it's okay. We will consult during the daytime and write software at midnight. That's sort of the way we did this. And so it is, what I would say, Anjan, to your question, what are the breakpoints? The breakpoints really are, when I always say this, when an opportunity comes in, don't wait for a convenient time to take care of the opportunity. You got to say, hey, if there's an opportunity, this is what I want, and embrace it, and don't be afraid. Many people underestimate their capability. I think that's what I see in a lot of people. When you underestimate your ability, you are always fearful. But most human beings have the capacity to rise to the occasion. So that's sort of what I've learned so far as a breaking point in my career. So it's having, hey, if it's tough, I'll know how to handle it.
No, Krish, that is fantastic. Number one, for some reason, your camera is out of focus, and I think it came back into focus. So somebody
is it focused now? No?
No, it was all right till before we started. So obviously somebody said that clearly Zoom doesn't like you.
Okay, so if let me, if I can unmute myself, and then I will keep talking and see whether I can wipe the camera. There may be a fingerprint here or there.
Or maybe there's some, you need to clean your lens maybe.
That's what I did. I mean, I have actually a very nice lens, Logitech Brio camera. So
just yeah, and that's perfect. That's perfect. I think that is what it was. That is
all right.
So, Chris, coming back to an important point that you said, that when you started, I'm going to try to pick things that might be relevant to all of us around the table in terms of a journey of entrepreneurship, journey of building a company. Then we're coming to selling the company separately. But you talked about friends with whom you started the company. 2000. Now, I can tell you from my personal experience, again, in MINDTREE, you start with people that you work with. At some point in time, there are some challenges that develop. What has been your experience and what's your advice?
Actually, it's easy to start with friends you know. And because there is a trust element, there's a give and take in all these environments. So, for instance, even at BlueJeans, which is the latest one, right? It's been a 10-year journey for me. I started with a co-founder, but he was, and we still go on. But then we hired colleagues that we knew who are social friends as well as work colleagues who are very good. So in a journey of any company, including ours, everything goes in phases. People are good at one phase, and as the company, let's say a product marketer may be good for the first 5 million in revenue, or maybe the first 25 million. And then as the company grows, you need different skills. But if you hire your friends, there are several things that happen, right? One is, depends on the friendship. You're very reluctant to give honest feedback. That's the number one, right? You're very reluctant to give honest feedback because where the friendship ends, when the professionalism ends, you don't know and you do that. But beyond that, when the job requires that you need to hire somebody else or somebody else above them that they have reached, you don't do that. You give them more leeway than you're not making a business decision anymore. And I think those are some of the issues when you hire friends. It's a great way to get started. It's a great way to get going when you don't have, when you're an entrepreneur starting for money and you say friends are the only ones that want to work for free. or some shares, right? But over time, if you're successful, that's when the problem happens. You need to be able to replace that friendship with professional people who can come in and help.
No, absolutely. No, that's very. I'm going to come back here, but I'm going to request you to just share with us the story of BlueJeans, how it ended. I mean, it was. Today video conferencing is big everywhere. But just can you give us quickly BlueJeans, where it started, a couple of challenges, and you sold it for $500 million. Where is it going? A little bit of the success there. Then we'll come back to the story a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I would say with respect to BlueJeans, it's a tale of two cities. The first city is we started maybe 6 months earlier than Zoom. Eric and I were working at Cisco roughly the same time, and we knew each other. We started with the idea that all video systems have to interoperate, whether, you don't have to use proprietary system, everything has to work together. And we started a cloud company that way. And we had great success in the market, but we were focused primarily on high-end enterprise customers, like Nike and Disney and Coca-Cola. So those are the companies that we were designing the system for, and the incumbents were Cisco and Microsoft. And so we were able to successfully challenge those companies and actually turn the architecture around, and everybody has BlueJeans in them. So that phase, the first 5 years of the company, it's a phenomenal growth in revenue, in customer satisfaction. I would say I reached 50 million in the first 3 to 4 years. Very fast, very fast rise. Then as Zoom started coming in and more competitors started coming in, they came in with a different angle, with the angle of not conference room-based video conferencing, but desktop-based video conferencing, and had a business model that was more freemium-like, more SMB-like. While we saw what they were doing, it's the inventor's dilemma, right? You see your success, you see that, and you say, well, I have my moat. I'm going to be successful here. They don't have this problem, and therefore I'm happy. And when they come here, I will defend myself. And I think at history has proven that was one of the worst decisions I could have made. as a CEO of the company. I ran the company for 8 years. So not recognizing that eventually could lead to a problem, SMB mid-market, as Zoom was coming in from that thing. We were focused currently on the enterprise, which is the big companies, and we are still doing well. And I think, and having not recognized is probably one of the regrets in terms of leading a company. But once you get behind, once you recognize that the market is going, it's hard to catch up. The thing that I had told myself was, when they come here, we'll catch up. No, you cannot catch up. It's a different set of things. So when fast forward, we still have all of the Fortune 500 companies, all of the big brand names that sell, that only uses BlueJeans. So you'll see them everywhere. But the market is 10 times bigger for mid-market and 100 times bigger for small, medium businesses and million times bigger for consumers, all put together, even though right? So while the big companies spend millions and millions of dollars on BlueJeans, the smaller people spend thousands of dollars, but they add up to hundreds of millions of revenues for Zoom. That's sort of the fundamental business strategy decision. And so coming back towards the end, I had a choice. I had a choice of raising more money to the tune of $100 million to raise the profile of BlueJeans and go after Zoom. And the coronavirus is helping us as well. We had 4 times the revenue in the last quarter as everything else. I mean, it was a big boom time. I could have raised money and done that, or I could find a buyer and find a safe harbor. Both are equal choices. And I'll make that point here. At that time, I actually hired a CEO and I was the executive chairman of the company. When you're in that position, you have 4 fundamental, for an venture company, fundamental responsibility. You have a duty to your customer. You have duty to your employees. You have duty to yourself, your management team, and your duty to your investors. So you have 4 constituencies you have to balance the rights of. And I looked at it and said, what is the best way to remove uncertainty in COVID period where everybody is shutting down? What's the best outcome? So then I decided, rather than trying to raise $100 million and try to get uncertainty of that, whether you can raise money and what happens to that, and the exit will be pushed out for another 2 to 3 years. Who knows? Better for my employees and my customer if I found a company that I can agree and actually carry the mission. And that's how I decided that fiduciarily I must do the right thing by selling the company. And fortunately, we found Verizon. I can share that story of who you did the deal with Verizon separately.
That's a very, very, must have been a very difficult, in one of your quotes, you say that, people always postpone tough decisions.
Yeah.
Must have been one of the toughest decisions you took. Should you raise money and go when everybody is saying that this will go, or should you sell? And within that, is Verizon the place where your baby will prosper? How did you, A, take that decision? And B, how did you, what are the competing voices that you were fighting with? And how did you come to peace with what decision you took?
A great question, Anjan. So it was like when we started this, like I would say there's a pre-COVID period and then there's the COVID period. And the pre-COVID period is when our business was like not doing well because the demand was, even Zoom was not as pervasive. This is not that long ago. This was just December and January. And we were looking at what the strategic direction BlueJeans need to do. How can we find our niche? And at that time, I wanted to sell the company, and my co-founder did not want to sell the company because he thought, actually, no, I wanted to go the distance, and he wanted to, said, okay, we may have to find a buyer. During COVID period, and during all these things, we actually, because of all the debate, we changed position. I was the one who wanted to sell, and he didn't want to sell. And it happened even with the board members. The investors who wanted to sell before did not want to sell because it was a tough decision, because you see the demand for the product go 400%. You had never seen that. The demand for BlueJeans went astronomical. Facebook alone did billion minutes of video conferencing a month. And they were just writing checks to us. 6- and 7-figure checks just for consuming the service. So you said, oh, wow, this is like the Dow going up these days. This good times will never end, even though people are suffering. but ultimately we decided that the right thing to do, as I said before, the economic uncertainty of the future, when the COVID eventually ends and the companies have to cut costs and so on, I didn't want my customer or my employees mainly to be in a different. So we decided, let's take the uncertainty and make it certain. And then Verizon was the easy part of the decision, because we have been working with them as a reseller. They were a reseller of BlueJeans, and we had negotiated, we had great vision. The new CEO of Verizon, Hans, has this vision of transforming Verizon from a carrier who just integrates technology to a carrier who wants to innovate on technology and actually bring a lot of technology in. And we felt that the vision matched, and we can actually continue the work of BlueJeans in terms of making video pervasive and be an effective competitor to Zoom in different markets. And so that decision was made. And then the price is just a market factor. I'll
come back to the end of it. You know, a lot of questions want to go to the beginning of it. And I'll pass it on to Suresh Kumar, who's a professor and teaches entrepreneurship. And one of the things when we talk about entrepreneurship, the key is always your first customers. You know, everybody, the 10th customer is fine, but when you are a nobody, you know, how do you get your first customers? Suresh has a question for you. Suresh, over to you.
Hi, Krish. Thanks for sharing your experience. So the question always is, and I deal with startups, right? So you're looking at the first sale. So we're looking at the first few thousand, 5,000, 50,000, 500,000. So the question is, and one of the challenges I've found with most startups that's founded by South Asian community, including Indian Americans, is that the sales organization is not as strong as the technology side. So my question was, since you focus on large corporates, how did you make that bridge? How did you build that team? And can you just walk us through how did you scale up in order to be able to get to where you are today?
Okay, great question. So and I tried with Anjan was saying, when you're selling to large corporation, right? The main thing is you're really not selling the company or the product. You're actually selling yourself. True. You are the person, the CIO or whoever is a buyer. He's actually trusting you. So in that sense, the Asian community is not at a disadvantage, because the initial sales and the initial things are all based on technology and savviness of the technology, and typical Indian entrepreneurs are very tech savvy, and that actually goes well, right? Now, when it comes to scaling the organization and so on, we did actually very well. Ours was, in BlueJeans' case, it was not an issue of sales leadership as much as a product leadership, the ability not to recognize market shift. But going back to your question of how do you scale a sales organization, you just have to find, the key is to find the sales leader that has the same vision and chemistry as you do. And I think many times that's actually what misses. There's always a friction between the vision of the CEO, the founders, the co-founders, and the sales organization. That the sales organization runs on coin operated. They get you into lots of different markets that you rather not be. This is the number one thing I found, right? You know, okay, somebody finds, oh, this company is willing to buy our product, but it has to have 10 different features that you don't have. It's not going to happen for a while. But they say, but if you did that, they will buy 10 million of this, right? So everybody has heard that story. And that is one of the biggest drawback if you don't have the chemistry with the sales. If the sales leader is not aligned with your vision and say, hey, don't stretch the company to where just because you need to make the number. So what I found is setting quotas and all those things sometimes are counterproductive to the strategic mission of the company, because then you tend to, you know what they say, you get what you measure. If you measure quotas, the sales team want to make that happen by any means necessary, including bringing bad customers and bad deals. Now that screws up the company big time.
Somebody once told me that, you know, can you give me 10 great salespeople? They don't exist. If there were 10 great salespeople, they would have started their own companies, they would have run their own stuff. The question is, what does the organization do to support the salesperson? And saying no is much more difficult.
Saying no to a deal is a lot difficult, especially when it is not no to you, and having that and having a good sales leader that is aligned with you, that has the same vision as you from a long-term perspective, then that is very important. Versus, so when we hire, the mistake we make is we look at the resume and say, this person has made 265% of quota, has met all their quota goals in the last brand, they're great sales leader. And if you use that to measure, hire a sales leader, you're going to fail. What you want is, have they hired a great sales organization? Have, what is the history behind thing? Have they acquired strategic customers? Has that person, when he has moved from company to company, has he been able to go back and win the same customer from the previous company to the new company? That tells you how the sales leader is viewed from the customer side. If Coca-Cola is your customer and you move from company A to company B, if Coke is happy with you when you are selling this widget, they should follow you when you are selling some other widget. And if they're not, you got to question that. And that's how I would judge a sales leader and how they are building a sales organization.
So Chris, you said something very interesting, said quotas can be counterproductive.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everybody's antennas went up. Laurelyn asked a question, if you don't measure, then what do you do? How do you measure? How did you manage that? So
quotas is counterproductive in the sense that if you only emphasize quota as a success measure, and if you don't have anything else, and your top gun, if you sold something and you exceeded 100% of whatever, 120%, if you only measured that, then it may be counterproductive. But if you also measured the quality of the customer that you buy in, the discounts you don't give, and the strategic nature of what you do and the features you don't promise, and you're aligned, those things seldom come into the measurement of a salesperson.
So Sri has a question for you on this topic. Sri, over to you.
Thanks, Anjan. Krish, one of the things we are amazed at looking at these fast-growing technology companies do is it's all about growth, growth, top-line growth at all costs, without consideration for profitability. Mm-hmm. So when you were on this accelerated growth path, did you prioritize profits, or was it just revenue, customer capture? And the other question is, sometimes growth-oriented companies also struggle with some customers that in the end just aren't worth it. They were great customers originally, but then they start becoming untenable. So
Yeah.
have you come across those situations also?
I do have them. Unfortunately, I cannot name them publicly, right? I wish I could. That's the one way of getting back to them. But to answer your question, did I do profitability over growth? Regrettably, no. I also growth. Because what happens, there is a emotional component about winning customers and sales and revenue growth, right? That's really what excites everybody. And that's really, right? So if you want to top line growth, excites everybody. And so that's what happens. But if I had to revisit, I wish I had focused more on profitability than growth. The reason being, profitability gives you control of the company far greater than revenue ever will, unless you go so fast and you reach a tipping point, therefore you have market share and therefore you can actually catch up with it. I mean, there are exceptions in a large scale like Amazon, right? I mean, they lost money, but eventually had enough market share that they could come back in. But for most small companies, I would say in hindsight or any time, profitability is a better guarantee of long-term success than just top-line growth.
I'll just move to Arun. Arun, you have an interesting question for Chris. Go ahead, Arun. Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Anjan. Well, thanks, Krish, for sharing your journey. Very inspiring. As an entrepreneur, we all aspire to making that kind of a tough decision that you had to make. Yeah. So my question is, on the product side, as you know, this field is quite crowded today and probably was crowded even 10 years back or whenever you started it, right? So there was competitors like Cisco, which was the heavyweight, with WebEx and, Microsoft, of course. So how do you differentiate in a crowded marketplace? That's the question. Like, one of the questions I get as an entrepreneur, and, I also mentor other startups, is when they're designing a product, they always worry there's too much competition. But that doesn't always seem to be the case. I mean, there are markets, there are always underserved markets or markets where you can do a product market fit, which makes your product more successful than the others. So you can just talk a little bit about how you differentiated yourself.
So this is my fundamental belief, which is there's always, even with the incumbents in a market, as long as the market is growing, it's not a stagnant, it's not like the same, the market doesn't go, it's a 3% CAGR. If the market is growing and there is opportunity, I believe it's never overcrowded. This is my personal philosophy. The reason being, the incumbents are also having innovators' dilemma. Once you have a customer, you have a handcuff. Once you have 10 customers, it's heavier. 100 customers, so the degree to which you can move is harder and harder as you get customer and customer. Now, if you think about therefore in the technology field, what happens is you have a lot of technology. Your software is 7 years old. You have a lot of tech debt, and the ability to move is harder. So when you're a new guy coming in for the same offering, you can do it better, faster, cheaper, and with a fresh coat of paint. It's not just, you can do that. And if we could, along with that, if we could integrate something that a newer trend into the thing, it comes in, right? What the number one innovation of Zoom was freemium. In this field, the freemium was not there. They say re-innovated on the business model. And then that gave them the ability. So my fundamental belief, there's no such thing as a overcrowded market. There's always an opportunity in any market. You just have to come up with your implementation, whether it be the business model or a small widget that is different. Even the other day, I saw a new company get funded by Andreessen Horowitz for video conferencing. You would think that after all this with Zoom everywhere and this is done, they funded a new video conferencing company that offers the same thing as Zoom.
My God. So there's a whole bunch of questions. I'll move. I will stay at the company growing level. Then there's a lot of questions on the exit part, and I'll get there. Vijay, over to you. Quick question.
Sure. Thanks, Krish. quickly, if you could go into software pricing, that's generally the hardest part when it comes to either funding yourself or going to profitability. How did you guys decide on your pricing? Because it's very different from Zoom. It has the annual bookings, and it doesn't look like it has a free model. So love to learn about that.
Well, what you see here is that today, when we started, we actually started with a very high price for our product. It was a unique one in the marketplace. There's nobody else. We started high, and that part of the growth. So another lesson learned. So you will hear this all the time by venture capitals, people in this field, which is, hey, it's okay to price high because you can always lower the price, but you can never raise the price. Everybody hears in this field, right? That's the number one thing. What I found out is that's a bunch of bullshit too, right? So in our experience, here's what happened. We priced a lot of customers at a high price. At some point, when the market price collapsed, you have a bunch of customers paying high price, and you're still growing, and you have a lot of customers coming in at a newer price. Now, if you either have to proactively change all the pricing for all the people. So we are talking about the tens of millions of dollars people are paid high price. So if you have to lower the price, you're going to take a lot of churn and a lot of loss. So what I would say to answer your question, pricing is, you have to price adequately with the market, but constantly revisit pricing. Pricing is not a one-time fix-all. You have to lower the pricing or the competitive pricing as soon as you find out that somebody is offering a lower price and they're going to be successful. You rather do it yourself before the customer churns. And that was a painful BlueJeans lessons as well. It was a great question.
So, Krish, it's amazing. We are at 40 minutes, but seems as if it's been just 4 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'll keep going.
I'll keep my answers short.
No. It's fantastic. I mean, there are so many. So I'll move a little bit from operations to leadership and your style. I have a question for you, and I'll pass it on to Sundi to add to that. You had said earlier that the answer is always people.
Mm-hmm.
Along with that, you in two of your previous companies, you started off as a CEO in one of them, and then you gave up. In BlueJeans, you became executive chairman. Might seem the most logical thing to do, but experience, all of us know, many people just cannot give up. So the question is, when do you know that the organization needs somebody else, A, and B, Sundi has a question along with that. Sundi, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Anjan. So Krish, I wanted to reflect upon the journey of having a need for a board. Sometime earlier on, it's informally as a board of advisor to formalizing a board. So how was that journey, and when did you really have a need to formalize a board? And how did you go about hiring the members? And most importantly, I think, the transition to actually starting to reporting to board and using them to leverage and stay focused and growing and stuff like that.
Well, in my case, the board was never a choice. It's a venture investment, so it comes with board. Everybody wants to hop on the board and so on, right? So that part is true. Then so more appropriately, how do you leverage your board? Does the board manage you, or you manage the board, and how do you take advantage of that is more appropriate question. For me, the fortunate thing is the venture investors, I leverage them to acquire customers. They have great relationship with potential introduction, so on. So all of the major customer, my first customer for BlueJeans, and still the best customer, is Facebook. Imagine if you're a nobody. Somebody had mentioned this before. You start a company. How do you go and acquire Facebook as your first customer? Right? That's when your board comes in and makes an introduction, and you go and do it, and then you go on. So you want to leverage your board. That's number one. And number two, boards are there and they like to get work. I mean, you have to give them work. If you don't give them work, they give work to you. Right? I mean, that's what happens in a board meeting, right? If you don't ask the question, they're just asking you the question and you're answering them. But if you were to say, how would you do this? I have this problem. How would you solve? The board meeting changed and they find out it's actually a tough problem. So we always go in and make sure that we have a bunch of things for the board to answer versus, I mean, it's after all their money, their investment, they get to make the big decision. So you do want to make sure that the board has work and you manage them and you leverage them. And also board also elevates you, right? When you're a nobody to a somebody because you're of association. So that's how I would say I like boards, because even when if you're if you're not a venture funded company, you want to have a board because you want to answer to somebody. Even if you're the founder, you want to say every month there is something to do, and you want use that as a forcing function to get a board to answer to somebody external. That always helps.
You know, just talking to you, one can figure out the journey that you came through and why you have managed to do the things that you have done. I have a question and I'll pass it to Juliet Hart. But before that, Juliet will add to that question. You know, in doing your research, there are so many quotes that came out which are relevant. One of your quotes is that survival is about buying time.
Yeah.
And I combine that with saying it's always about people. So while you are doing this, and we are all entrepreneurs, we did start with success, we were building it. At what point do you build your own, skills? And around that, Juliet, over to you.
Sure, thanks. So my question is around leadership development, because I'm curious about it and I work in the space. But for you personally, where do you tribute and how did you learn your personal leadership skills to develop your team and lead your organization?
That's really a tough question because I'm still learning. But I think for me, leadership is what I want to do. I don't want to say it comes naturally. That sounds bad. What it is, I do for a situation. I want to say, how do I want to act in this situation? Or I think about that. In one way. So it's also about, and to go back to her question, it's really about people as well. How do you want to lead your people? You don't want, my personal philosophy is people want to do things for you versus you want to command something of them, right? That's the core of my belief, that I want to be able to influence people in the way I do things and show by example, and rather than saying, I'm the boss, you listen. So, right? So I know for a fact that when I set a direction now, I have people will follow me into a battle, and they know that I'm in the trenches with them every day. I'm not the one that if they're hurting, I'm hurting too. So once you, it's the trust. So for me, how do you get, so really about authenticity. If you're authentic, people will gravitate toward you. If you can develop trust, people will believe, they want to do things for you. And then just be natural, right? You don't want to take advantage of people and you don't want to do any of that. So one thing I want to share along the leadership line, and I'll give you, and it's a slightly longer segment. The first time, as part of introducing a product back in 2015, what I did was, I said, I'm going to open my board meeting to the entire world, to the entire company. It's almost like watching Survivor, right? You think about a board meeting and you have cameras on and the entire board meeting is broadcast to the entire company live, right? And it has never happened anywhere in Silicon Valley itself. And I did it and I continued that practice for about 12 board meetings every quarter. And it was a surreal thing. And why did I do that? And here's the leadership lesson. When the entire company is watching and your sales leader goes in front of the board and he's saying the sales are great, and some of the board members are going to ask, hey, what happened? You promised this big deal last quarter. What happened to that deal? Imagine that scenario, the entire company is watching, the sales leader is on the spot, somebody said, you promised me this $1 million deal, what happened to it? If in a normal board meeting, the sales leader is going to say, hey, you know what, the customer changed their mind, blah, blah, blah. He will never say we screwed up. But if the board meeting is open to the entire company, the sales team knows the truth, what really happened in that deal. So when he's put on the spot, he has a choice. Do I say the deal is deferred, or come across and say, we made a mistake? Because if he lies, he loses the trust of the team. But if he says the truth, he's going to be misjudged by the board. What choice will he make? And that's what I want my leaders to go through every board meeting, to earn the trust of the team, not trust of the board. And because the team is what matters at the end of the day. So I did that for 12 board meetings, open board meetings, broadcast everybody to earn the trust of the rank and file.
Brilliant, story. Related to that, slightly different, but so you at Topspin, you had Internet Junction, BlueJeans. At one level, these companies had nothing to do with each other. It's not that somebody did a biotech after biotech after biotech. So how did you come to these decisions? What prompted you to take these decisions, embark on this journey, and then decide that this one I'm going to grow, this one I'm not going to do? How did you come to that decision?
Well, each one was a different opportunity. I'll tell you the story of Topspin might be very interesting to some of you, because it is quite whimsical. Back in 2000, everybody here should remember the dot-com bust, and I too was busted. I was the general manager at Cisco, but but there was enough money there. I made enough money there that I thought I would retire. But I stayed home for 2 months, and my wife said, no, you cannot retire. You're eating all the leftover food every day. We all know this now. So I had to go find work, and my friend had started this company called Topspin, and they wanted me because Topspin was making the product that I was actually at Cisco, the general manager of, a competing product, a better product. So they said, hey, why don't you do this? And I also went in. But the dot-com bust made the product obsolete. So even though I knew going in that the company's product for which I had the expertise is not something that's going to survive in the market. So that's the story I think I shared with you, which is I went in, I said, wow, these guys are making ASIC, they're making the dot-com is gone, there's no IS service providers anymore, there's no website, there's no other dot-com, what are we going to do? We had money. They had $15 million venture funded money, after which they only spent maybe $600,000. So that's when I had to make a decision. There are 30 people in the company. I said, all right, what are you going to do? This product is not going to work. We're going to completely redo the company. And we are going to shut it down or return the money to the venture people. So first I went to the board, the venture investor, and said, you hired me last week, but this week I'm telling you the company is no good. Right? So I said, but give me 30 days, I'll come up with something. I don't know what it is, but I'll come up with something. And if you like it, you can fund it. If you don't like it, we shut it down, you check, and I go back to going home, and I'd rather hear from my wife about eating her leftovers. So what happened, so I had 30 days to get the company, divided the company into 3 or 2 groups, competing groups, and said, go in, think of it as venture invest, you have 15 million to play with, find a business plan, anything you want to do. If it's good, let's go do it. So fortunately, we were able to, technology people, they came up with a few ideas, nothing related to the present company, and we had nothing to lose. we decided, hey, let's go build supercomputers. Had nothing to do with anybody. Nobody had the expertise. Somebody said, hey, let's do supercomputers. And nobody wanted to return the money to the VCs. So now that you decided that you want to do supercomputers, you just have to convince the VCs to go with it. You have to convince the employees to, hey, we can do it. You just have to convince the customers that this is the best supercomputer idea in the planet. And then, and that's what we did. And I went and did all the deals with IBM, Sun Microsystem, Dell, and HP, and we were the market king. But again, we were using a different variation of a technology that was not very viable. It was a competing technology to Ethernet, and we all knew eventually Ethernet technology always wins versus So when Cisco came knocking, they were looking into the server business. I knew that this is a good time to sell the company. But when we were there, you have to take advantage of the lemon, as they say, and make it into lemonade. You got it, right? So I wasn't about to return the 15 million to the VC. We got to find something to do. That's the story of Topspin. And Cisco bought me and I did something there for them.
Brilliant question. So I know we have 7 minutes left, and I'm going to start moving to the towards the sale part of it a little bit. A lot of questions on that. So when you start a company, you own the company 100%. You co-founders. You mentioned that you straight away had a VC funded, so you had a board. Your ownership comes down. Then you sell the company, and the value of the company goes up. So Orko has a question around that. Orko, over to you.
Thank you, Anjan. And so, in my research of how companies evolve over time, I always find it very, very difficult to actually understand the history of how the cap sheet of the company has evolved. So, what is your advice in terms of preventing dilution of the cap sheet, so that over time, I mean, you have a very impressive exit, right? But if you're diluted to nothing, perhaps you didn't get anything. So the question is, how do you take that into consideration, and how do you make your decisions based on that?
So it's a great question. So the only way you don't dilute your cap table is not by taking more and more venture money for growth, right? There's no other money. If you're growing at a great thing, and you can take small amount of money, and therefore you're not diluted. But if you're growing anemically, and if you're taking more money, your dilution is going to come down. You're going to work for pennies on the dollar by the time you sell the company, right? So the only way to prevent is to answer the earlier question is focus on profitability a little bit. The more you can be profitable, on the cusp of profitability, because it's a fine line between profitability and growth. I mean, you focus excessive on profitability, you're not growing and you're standing still and you're in still water, and that is also no good. So you need to find the line. But when you're losing a lot of money, getting a lot of venture money and diluting yourself without a viable business plan, you're just working for salary at that point in time. So I would say focus on profitability to prevent the dilution from happening. And however, I also have friends who will not take venture money fearing dilution. Of even they start a company, it's all the friends' money, but they won't take venture money because they don't want to give up. That problem also is bad because you're not growing. There's going to be a venture funded company that's going to come in and that's just going to grow, and you're a nobody in the market. So you don't want to go to the other extreme of not taking venture money. But I think if you have an adequate business plan of being profitable, you control your destiny. So if you've much better.
So I'll pick up from there a little bit. You said destiny. Nachiket has a question. In your own leadership style, how do you mentioned about retiring. I guess you were 20 years younger at that time or so, but how do you wake up? What drives you? Where are you driving? For example, what made you wake up this morning, today? And what has driven you through the depths of despair? how have you seen yourself in the mirror and overcome those challenges?
Well, I'll start with this morning a lot easier. Fundamentally, I think I believe that I have an obligation. I always and say this over and over again to the customers who still buy from me. And when I say buy from BlueJeans, they buy from me, right? That the big deals that I've done, the millions of dollars of deal, it's only because they know when they shake hands with me, it's as good as gold, that they don't need a contract. They can, and so that keeps me waking up. Then there is the employees that need, so those are, so in this case, Verizon, they bought us, right? I don't have to work hard anymore. It's not a survival. I don't need to, right? And if this thing fails, Verizon is not going to go under, right? However, as a human being, I've made a commitment to make this technology sizzle for Verizon. That the personal commitment you made. Hey, you buy BlueJeans, I'm going to be here. I'm going to make it the best technology buy. So that personal commitment is really what makes me get out of bed every day and do the best you can, because somebody paid money for this. And when you pay money for this, it's our obligation to do the best you can. That's really what it is.
Well, that's fantastic. We could go on for a long time. I have 3 minutes left and I want to end on time. Last question from
you guys. I can spend another 10 minutes if it's okay. I don't have a problem, but it's up to you.
So there are lots of
it's going to impact your dinner time. It's not my dinner time. It's only a tea time here. So,
question for you, Krish, is, another quote that I picked up, I must tell you, just a lot of wonderful quotes I picked up. One is, you said, inertia kills everything.
Yeah.
I want to add to that. You said inertia kills everything. And then you add to that the COVID situation where there is no opportunity of inertia because we are all changing. So how do you take this as a tenet? Inertia kills everything. So there's no option. But now something is definitely going to push you. So what decisions should companies take given the COVID situation? And then just leave it out. And if you can comment on inertia kills everything by itself also, that would be great in terms of decision.
So what I meant by that is, if you're standing still, deer crossed in a headlight, I don't know what to do, I don't want to make any decision, I'm just standing still. The world doesn't matter what it is, everything's a dynamic system. Things are moving every day, right? Your customers are changing, your business environments are changing, your competitors are morphing, what it is. Everything is changing. So if you stay still and not make any decision because you are fearful of making a decision, that eventually is going to get you. So in the COVID situation, right, and in my situation, same as many of you, you have the opportunity to look at the market and say, hey, is this a time for me to take advantage of the market? My competitors are down. My customers, maybe I should, this is the time, go aggressively and expand on the market, invest, so that when it opens up, I have a better product. That could be one, right? Or I could say, hey, things are going okay, but I don't know what's going to happen 6 months from now. I don't know whether there's going to be a second wave. What happens then? Perhaps, maybe, even though I am okay, perhaps I should conserve cash and actually do whatever the painful things now. That would be another non-inertial action. Or I would say, well, I've been trying to do this. This product has not been working for me, or the growth is not there. Perhaps I use this when the markets are all frozen, stand still. I might vector the company to a different point or pivot, right? All these things are valid. But if you just sit there and say, what can we do till I won't make any decision until I know clear idea when COVID ends, then it may work out, it may not work out. That's all I meant.
So Yadu has a question for you around this area. Yadu, over to you.
Thank you, guys. Chris, you seem to have an instinct, right? I've heard you speak about, I sort of made this decision. You seem to be using your gut feel a lot. So 2 questions. One is this gut feel that you have always had, even when you're a construction guy? And the second is, I was listening. And the second is this something that has been, that has come about as you've entered this line of work?
I think gut feel is really more about maturity and confident as you grow, and you're the pattern matching, right? Everybody understands, right? So as I've grown, I tend to trust my instincts more so rather than going with the herd mindset, I question and want to be satisfied myself, even if it's a contrarian view. So in terms of instinct and starting companies, I want to mention one thing along with the same line. It's not really gut, it's really understanding trend lines. Many people react to headlines. Foreign entrepreneurs will react to headlines. Today it's all about machine learning and AI. So let me start a company on AI or machine learning. That's a headline-based thing. But what I like to look for is trend lines. Where are multiple trends happening, and will they converge? If they converge, there's a new opportunity. That's really what I would call the gut feel of how I approach product direction, even starting companies. Is there's a trend here in this sector, there's a trend here in this sector, and there's a trend here. If at scale, if these trends, is there an opportunity for all these multiple trends to intersect, and at the intersection, what happens? So example of that would be, hey, if you have lots of autonomous cars, you have electric cars that are selling, these autonomous vehicles that are growing, you have 5G coming up. Is there an opportunity for all these things together to create a company that can service these different, seemingly isolated trends, right? Cars has nothing to do with 5G. 5G has nothing to do with something else, but somehow they all can intersect at some point in the future. And if you think about that, that's what I would call gut feel in terms of intuition. Hey, where can I start a company? So if I were to step down from BlueJeans today, I would have no problem coming up with a completely different field and say, hey, maybe there's blockchain here, there's 5G there, and there's something else here. What can I put together? That's how I operate. Trend line versus headlines.
That's a fantastic quote. Trend lines versus headlines. Suresh, I'll pass it on to you. You have something to say.
Suresh likes my thing about counterproductive Dakotas.
Hey, Suresh, are you there?
Yes, Krish, again, thanks for all the wonderful experience you have shared. So I wanted to make a request on behalf of the TiE University program, which I happen to be leading within NJ. If you have the time, and maybe this will give you a little break from your wife, since she seems to be happy with you being at home, perhaps if you could spare some time to be a judge. We're having the final competition, about 10 teams next Monday. Okay. And I thought, apart from being a judge, some feedback that you can provide to the teams will really be invaluable. Time allows, we'll really appreciate it.
So we can take that offline and talk to you about it separately, Krish. That's fine. Yeah.
And
it should be very exciting.
Raman, we are 6 minutes over and we have lots of questions, and I'm going to pass it to you, Raman, to close it a little bit with your reflections on how the whole session went. Raman, over to you.
Yeah, so this was really thrilling for me. I mean, I learned a great deal, and it's extraordinary the way you were able to integrate things at a macro level, Krish, including embracing opportunity, making tough decisions, with dealing with friends and co-founders, macro decisions around leadership, identification of opportunities, the way you said about trend lines intersecting and looking ahead, but also, your micro insights, including sales leadership, pricing, nitty gritty stuff that we all have to deal with in business. So I just have to say, you certainly help fulfill our mission, which is to add value to our community of entrepreneurs, and also exchange insights, best practices. You helped us do that as well. And so I just want to thank you for this wonderful, wonderful evening. Great evening.
Oh, it was my pleasure as well. I learned a lot from the questioning, and a lot of great questions. I enjoyed this. And I just wanted to reach out, and I know I was just looking at the chat myself, and I don't think we covered all of the questions. If somebody wants to reach out, Krish at BlueJeans.com is my email, and feel free to drop me a line on that. Krish, Krish at BlueJeans.com.
Well, if you like, Krish, if you like, what we could do is we could actually compile the questions, because they are just terrific questions, and actually circulate your responses to the attendees this evening, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's all fine.
Yeah, and we'll have your email address as well, so they can.
Yeah, anybody wants to reach out, I'll be happy to share my insight. As I said, my insight is just mine. Your mileage may vary a lot. Everybody has to apply to their own. But I would close by, I would say, the opportunity in this country is tremendous for anybody. There is right? I mean, I'd still be a construction worker in India. Because, all right, doing coal power plants, but did not know that I would be writing software. But the opportunity, that's what this country is all about. And despite of all the things that are going on and so on, what we as immigrants, we should not forget that you will never get an opportunity like this in any part of the world, and it is up to us to leverage it. And as a community, not just Indian, but as a community, we all have the obligation of helping each other out. I was helped by a lot of people when I didn't know anybody. Somebody guided me to the next level. So I try to do that as much as I can, and that is really what I guess that's what TiE is all about, and that's what we need to do. Continue doing, help each other up to go to the next level.
Indeed, I think that is, that's the really excellent and pithy message to leave us with. I would urge everybody to hear Krish's speech when he received his PhD honorary doctorate from Monmouth University, because I think that exemplifies a lot of the things that, Krish, you were talking about this evening. So I would urge everybody to do that. And, it just shows that you don't need a Harvard MBA in order to be an immensely successful entrepreneur. And in fact, maybe a Harvard or Columbia MBA is a potential deterrent to being a great entrepreneur. So
I completely agree with you, because I refuse to hire MBAs in our company.
just terrific, Chris. Thank you very much. And Anjan, and thank you for hosting us, and also thanks to Sibi of Mar Labs, who helped us get introduced to you, Krish. So thank you all, and thank you all for attending and such great questions. Good evening. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.